Hi, I'm Jeff Malecki. I teach at St. Xavier University here on the south side of Chicago, and I'm here to play through the characteristic study number 11 from the Arban's book for you. Before we jump into that, I had a few strategies as to how to handle this piece. It's not the easiest etude in the world. A lot of this Arban stuff isn't. So the first thing I would do is read through and decide your biggest disaster areas. Chances are there's going to be something that at very least doesn't go perfectly. There certainly was for me. And what you want to do is structure your practice routine around that. So let's say we have a problem with the leaps around measure 9, 10, 11, 12. We'll want to practice just kind of some interval studies in our basic warm-ups. If the middle section keys are throwing us off, of course we're going to go back to practicing scales and arpeggios, which is so much of what this Arban's is, or maybe some of the lip slurs there near the end when it goes back to the key of B flat major. When we actually look at the piece, after we work on those fundamentals, we're going to take the fundamentals and apply them to the piece. Isolate a few measures. There's no reason to just kind of run through the entire page, the things that sound good and the things that don't sound as good. So to give you an example of how to isolate those measures, for me the tricky measures were measures 11 and 12, which I think are the hardest of the piece. So the way I approach those is, first of all, I took the grace notes out. I think that's what makes it really, really hard. So we wanted to make it solid just with the 16th notes. In passages like this, it's very important that the bottom notes or the melodic moving notes are always the ones that get the most weight, and we hear those, as opposed to letting those upper notes kind of dominate. So making sure that those bottom notes were coming out nice and good. I practiced very, very slow. I practiced at quarter note equals 50. I tell my students here at St. Xavier all the time, you should never play something faster than you can play it well, or perfectly, I should say. So for me that was quarter note equals 50, which is really, really slow, but it just by click, ends up being that much more solid when it does come up to tempo. Last but not least, I try chopping things up when I'm adding grace notes back into it, and in general. And that's a great way to break up the monotony of playing it slowly and to really make sure it's under your fingers. Let me show you what I mean. The simplest structure would be, let's say, we'll put the grace notes in it for right now. Just kind of 3-note little chunks here. Make sure those are 3 really solid notes. Then we might want to expand that by blocking them together in 5s. And of course we can block it together in 6s and 8s, and before we know it that would be there that way. One thing I like to do that's even more tricky is splitting that open to just the kind of 3-note chunks by themselves and not letting a note repeat, which really puts you on the front of your seat. And so on. So those are just a couple strategies that I use in the treble measures. The last word, the Pui Lento, I take that around 80 beats per minute. That's completely up to you. I'm sure your judges are going to be listening for some good musicality regardless, so that's a place to really shine. There are a few different places to speed back up. We could definitely look at measure 29, measure 37, or measure 48 as good places. I put a little bit of an accelerando right after measure 48, right at that key change. But as long as we're at tempo at measure 53 so that we kind of get that restatement of the beginning material, we are good to go. Thank you very much. Good luck and play well on your auditions.